consider these three things: where you come from, where you're going, and before who there will be an accountability, automatically you'll be humbled. And now, before who you will give an accounting or a verdict and an accounting. So here, there's very interesting Rabbeinu Yonah. Rabbeinu is the commentator here. He writes that in the physical life, a person can do something which is unconscionable. And you're disgraced and it becomes public knowledge. But you realize over time, everything fades out. You forget, people forget, and then you're able to have a comeback even. It's not as obvious. It's not before everybody's eyes what you were in the past, regardless of what you did in the past. Now, the whole concept of forgetting, why does a person forget? You know, we say people have short memories. Why do people forget? The Talmud tells us that if forgetting is a gift of life, why is it a gift of life? Because if a person experiences a loss of a loved one, and every moment you would experience that loss with that same emotional pain, as you experience it the first moment, for the rest of your life, you will not survive. So immediately, when a person experiences anything in life, as time goes on, time heals. Why does time heal? Because there was a gift given to humanity called forgetting. See, even though you may remember vividly the event whenever it took place, but factually, as time goes on, there's a certain aspect of fading, and that fading allows you to deal with that moment, as painful it was at the time it was. You still may experience pain, but if it would be at the level of the first moment that you experienced it, you couldn't survive it. If one of the gifts that God gave to mankind is forgetting. We forget, but you realize forgetting is a double-edged sword. As you forget the good, we forget the bad. And as we should remember certain things to make corrections in our lives, like for instance, we say a person does something which is unconscionable. It's important to remember it. Why? Because by feeling the shame and embarrassment, you can address it, you make a correction on it. But if time heals and time causes to forget, the person is not going to make that correction as he would have the first moment. So therefore, if you let time pass, very often, if you make the correction immediately, the correction is made. But if you let time pass, since you don't feel and internalize that unconscionable act as it was the first moment, is a very serious question whether you're going to make the correction correctly or you will make the correction period whatsoever. You'll just let it linger and then just passes. That's what it is. The Talmud tells us that if you see a Torah sage sinning, you should give him the benefit of the doubt that what? That by the next morning, he did tshuva. He made the correction. If you saw him sin at night, by the morning, he made the correction. Look, we're all human. There's no perfect person. We all have our moments of weakness. But even though he has that moment of weakness, no different than many other people, but by morning, he made the correction. So the Gemara says, the Talmud says, maybe he made the correction. So the Talmud says, maybe he definitely made the correction. What does that mean? He definitely made the correction. That because he sees it so acutely and he experiences the wrong and he was caught off guard, so to say, and that's why he failed, and he has a full sense of the wrong of that, he corrects it immediately. But let's say you don't have a full sense of that wrong because your spiritual antennas are not that acute. I did the wrong thing. It's not the end of the world. As a result of that, it could wait. and then you allow time to pass. The moment you let time pass, what happens? It dulls. The forgetting effect comes into play. Therefore, what initially, the way you even saw it then, you no longer see it that way. It's not the end of the world. I could live with it. And I could even repeat it. Become a repeated offender. It's very interesting. You know, in most societies, there's a penal system. Person does the wrong thing, goes to prison. And one time going to prison in anybody's vocabulary or experience wasn't a pleasant experience. Prison was suffering. What you ate, your setting was literally subhuman. And there was even the question if you would go there, whether you'd come out alive. That's how intolerable it was. So the more painful the incarceration was, if the person would even consider repeating the wrong that he had done while he went there initially, he's going to think about it many times before he crosses that line again. Because as much as forgetting is a gift when we forget, but remembering what he experienced there, that he will never forget. So he may not remember it with that same level of acuteness, but it'll be sufficiently painful enough that if he's smart, he's not going to become a repeated offender. Of course, he's going right back there, and maybe even worse. First time he made it out, the second time he may not make it out. Or his predicament may be worse. So Rabbeinu Yonah explains that the only reason why a person forgets is because a person is a physical being. Within the physicality of a person, we forget. It's part of the physical makeup. What about if a person, his soul departs, and he's confronted with the claim by God that he failed? Do you know what it means? That you stand before God and you have no stone to hide under. And there's no way to rationalize and justify whatever you did because you're confronted with the evidence. In that situation, the only reason why there's forgetting is because you're a physical being. But if you're stripped of your physicality and you stand before the heavenly court as a spiritual being, that first moment of embarrassment becomes the eternal moment of embarrassment. Eternally, you experience it at the most extreme level of embarrassment. Understanding that, what the reality of the spiritual world is, before who you will give a verdict and accountability, knowing that, that should be enough to be a deterrent that you shouldn't cross that line. To humble you, to don't think you're so high on your horse. Don't think you dictate your own life. Because ultimately there is a master who reign in on you, because you're only a subject. God said to Adam, the day you will eat of that fruit, you'll be subject to death. So if Adam would have never eaten of the tree of knowledge, and he would have withstood the temptation, Adam would have been an eternal person. The concept of death for humanity would have had no relevance. So good. So we're explaining why is forgetting a gift of life? Because death is inevitable. And everybody experiences that experience. A loved one passes away. So to be able to survive and deal with that level of pain and grief of losing a loved one, God gave a gift called forgetting. But let's say man would never die. There's no reason to forget. Because that is the primary reason why you forget. Only be able to continue on. So if one would not die, there's no forgetting. So now, the Talmud tells us that at Sinai, we failed with the golden calf. God gives us the Torah, we hear the 10 commandments. Moshe sends to heaven to bring down the 10 commandments, the tablets with 10 commandments. And right before he returns, the Jews are involved in idolatry. Moshe Rabbeinu is told by God, go down, your people have become corrupted. Moshe comes off the mount with the tablets. He sees the golden calf. He sees them worshiping it. He takes the tablets. He smashes the tablets. Okay? So the Talmud tells us, based on the verse in Prophets, if the Jews wouldn't have sinned with the golden calf, they had reverted back to pre-sin of Adam, they would have been eternal. They would have not been subject to death. The only reason why they were subject to death is because they reverted back to post-sin because they were involved in idolatry. So they forfeited that eternal status because they failed with idolatry. But if they wouldn't have failed with idolatry, they would have lived eternally. Now, the Torah describes the 10 Commandments. It was stone, and the letters were etched on the stone, but they were fiery letters. And the Midrash tells us when he smashed those tablets, the letters made of fire floated heavenward. They floated towards heaven. What was the symbolism of the letters floating towards heaven? That means that the Torah you study will be forgotten. Just as the letters floated and disappeared, as much as you study was subject to death, was subject to forgetting, and therefore you have to continuously review, because if you don't review, you're going to forget. Because forgetting is part of life. So the Talmud is saying, the Midrash is saying, if not for the sin of the golden calf, anything you study would have been etched in your mind, emblazoned on your heart, never to forget. But because they sinned with the golden calf, therefore you have to continuously review, because if you don't review continuously, you're going to forget. What relevance is one thing after another? Exactly what we're saying. If the Jews wouldn't have sinned with the golden calf, they reverted back to pre-sin of Adam, we were eternal. If we're eternal, death has no relevance to us. If death has no relevance to us, for us, forgetting is not a gift. Forgetting is a detriment. So therefore, any Torah we would study, we'd remember. Because the gift of forgetting has no relevance to us, of course, we became eternal. But what happens after we sinned with the golden calf? We're subject to death. We reverted back to post-sin of Adam. Once we're subject to death, what happens? Now you must forget. Because if you can't forget, if you don't forget, you can't survive that pain. The grief of the first moment. Once you forget, it's a double-edged sword. Once you're subject to forgetting, you forget the Torah that you studied. Therefore, continuously you have to review, because if you don't review, you're not going to remember, because forgetting is part and parcel of life, of existence. That's why they go hand in hand with the breaking of the tablets, the symbolism of the letters floating upwards, meaning the knowledge will dissipate and evaporate. That's only a result of being confirmed as mere mortals who are subject to death. What is death? Death means something exists, something's vibrant, and as a result of death, it deteriorates, it decomposes, and eventually disappears. What is forgetting? You have knowledge. And it gradually, the knowledge evaporates. Initially, you have a faint recollection, and eventually it totally disappears. So basically, forgetting is really the death of knowledge. The same process that humanity is subject to death, meaning nothing is forever. It's here and then gone. As a result of that, what you study, what you know, what you experience is not permanent. Over time, it dissipates, it disappears. So what's death in the physical is death in the intellectual. It's death of the intellectualism of a human being. We find that when Yaakov had believed that his son Yosef was devoured by a beast, it says that he grieved as much as his family tried to console him. his children, his daughters-in-law, try to console him, he would not be consoled. Would not be consoled. And Rashi over there explains, and the Sefarno, a person's only consoled if you are attentive to the consolation. But if you're not, overtly, he wanted to remember that his son was no longer there. And he kept revisiting that fact. See, he didn't want to forget. Meaning, forgetting is natural. As we say, time heals. What about a person when he experienced the tragedy? Every day, he has a video of it, and he watches it, and he revisits it, and he re-experiences every day. He's not forgetting. And he's doing a disservice to himself. Of course, which was meant to be that time heals, time is not healing this person. And he's going to have all the consequences of not forgetting, which God created man that he should forget. Because he keeps revisiting it. What about in the positive? They have one of a kind of experience in life. And because it was such a special experience, you can't get it out of your mind. And every day you think about it and you dream about it. And you keep revisiting it. Because it was so special. Then what is it? You're not going to forget about that experience. I'll give you an example. Person would never visited the Swiss Alps. And all his life he dreamed about going there. And he sees it. One of the 7 wonders of the world. And it's a one of a kind of experience. It's so deeply etched in his mind and his emotion because of the positiveness of that experience. Every day he thinks about that. Because he thinks about it every day, understand? Even lasting 40 years later about the experience, it's like he relives that experience continuously. As a result of that, he doesn't forget. Even though forgetting is a natural part of existence. If a person studies Torah and you continuously review it and you see it as special, and because it's so special, you don't want to forget. Because that's the degree that you esteem it and revere it and endear it. So you're always visiting it. You can't get it out of your mind. It's like the Rambam, it says at the end of Hilchos Tshuva that the ultimate service of Hashem is Avos Hashem. You serve God out of love. What's love? He cites a verse from Psalms, from David. He was in love with God that it was almost like an obsession. He couldn't get him out of his gut. As much as he had of God, he never had enough. He lived it, he experienced it, he yearned it, and he wanted it. If a person, that's the way he serves Hashem. That's the way he studies Torah. He has such a love for Torah. The man himself, he dreams it, he eats it, he breathes it. He's not forgetting what he studied. Because there's a continuous re-experiencing and reviewing and reliving that moment. Yaakov had something which was given to him, transmitted down to him. He was meant to father the 12 tribes. And he had a Masorah, that means it was known to him from God, that if any one of his children die in his lifetime, he will not have a share in the world to come. So he believed, so that means when he believed Yosef was no longer alive. All his levels of accomplishment now are worthless, and therefore he will never have a relation with God. So initially, the value and objective of the value of his existence, he realized now has come to an end. So he's mourning, remembering Yosef, is because that is the crux of why his life is a failure. That's a confirmation it's a failure. Because it was a success, Yosef could have never died. That he died was only an indication that he wasn't worthy to be the father of the Jewish people, which ultimately would address the objective of creation. That's the understanding. Find that when Yaakov fled to the community of his father when he married his wives. It says he was on Mount Moriah, and he fell asleep, and he had a prophecy. And he saw angels ascending a ladder, going down a ladder, up a ladder, down a ladder. Now, initially, it says he took stones in the plural, put them around his head. And when he awoke, he found all 12 stones were fused into one stone. So the Midrash said he took 12 stones. And when he awoke, the 12 were one. What did that indicate? It was known that whoever be the father of the Jewish people, he will father 12 sons, which are the 12 tribes. And those 12 tribes, their descendants would stand at Sinai to receive the Torah and be taken as God's chosen people. But you have to have 12 sons. If any of his sons dies before he has children, so all 12 stones were fused in one, that was a confirmation that Yaakov is the patriarch who's meant to father the Jewish people and ultimately bring about the objective of creation. That's where it all began. Now that he believes Yosef dies, that means, why did he die? Evidently it was due to his failing. To Yaakov's failing. He's not worthy, he's not deserving of that. For that, he deserves to go into the oblivion and not have a relation with God. So he was grieving over that reality. And he didn't want to forget that because that was the crux of the issue. Therefore, he didn't want to be consoled. He always wanted to remember his failing, but ultimately, it turned out Yosef was alive. And that's why it says when he found that Yosef was alive when his brothers returned from Egypt, it says his spirit became alivened as a result of that. Because now he knew that he will be the one to address the objective creation, that the 12 sons are alive to father those children who someday would stand at Sinai to receive the Torah.